So the purpose of this video is going to be demonstrating how I can export the faces of a model to different two-dimensional views into AutoCAD to then use with the laser cutter. So I have here my model of a little doghouse, and most of the faces I'll be able to orient to just fine to be able to export directly from any of the kind of principal views. But there are a few faces, particularly this one right here of this ramp, and then also my roof, and then this back face, in which bringing myself to just straight look on or straight look at this from the back is not going to give me this face at its true length. So I need to do just a little bit of extra work to align it to that one of them. You can also do this same process for interior walls and things like that. For this particular project, I'm just going to only focus on the outer areas or the shell of the entire design. But there are a few little things you need to do for prep work here. One of them being making sure that your camera is set to parallel projection rather than perspective. If I have it set with perspective, what's going to happen is if I try to orient directly to any of those views, the fact that things are going to become foreshortened because of that perspective is then going to potentially cause some problems. So I want to make sure that my camera is set to parallel projection, and then I can orient myself to either the front, the left, the right, the back, the top through the camera menu again by just using the standard views here. Or what I like to do is I have right up here in my toolbar, I just have a quick access to look at things from directly from the top or directly from the front. To add this into your toolbar, that is in the View tab, Toolbars. And you can see that I have a couple of toolbars that I like to have. I like to use the large tool set rather than the Getting Started one. I have Enscape here just because I use Enscape kind of frequently. And then I have a few extensions here like this joint push pull, and I also have slicer here too that I really like. But all the way at the bottom is the views one, so I can just easily kind of orient myself to views. But right now I just want to export just this face of my model to a 2D line work vector that I can put into AutoCAD. If I wanted to, I can then take like this part of my model and erase it by hitting delete. So that way I'm only exporting this one face, but I'm going to Control Z. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would recommend leaving your model as is and then just kind of going into AutoCAD and getting rid of any line work that you don't want. So to export this into a 2D graphic, I'm going to go into the File tab, Export, and then I want to do it as a graphic, not a 3D model. When I go to export it, it's going to automatically say, hey, do you want to do it as an AutoCAD DWG file, which I certainly do. You just want to pay attention to where it's putting it. So by default, it's putting it in the My Documents folder of my computer, which is fine for me. Sometimes I like to just put everything on the desktop. And so I'll call this one just front. And then it's exported that as a 2D AutoCAD drawing file. So if I go look at my desktop, I can open up my file called front. This is just saying, hey, this DWG file was made in a software that wasn't AutoCAD, and I'm just going to say always open it and continue, so that way I don't have to hit that every time. And now it has exported it full size as a DWG file. And so now it's, instead of being a 3D model, I just have line work, and I can go through and I can just click on any line and then use delete on my keyboard to get rid of the lines that I don't want. So now I can have it cut this out, or at least start to get ready to have the laser cut this out. So the same thing then is I'll orient myself to one of the sides. So I can do that through camera, standard view, click on right, or I could just use the buttons here, file, export, 2D graphic, and I'll call this one right. It's going to put it as its own separate file. So now I have a file here called front and a file here called right. And all I'm going to do to combine these into one file, I could do it a couple of different ways. but I'm just going to highlight it from here and Control C to copy it. And then I'm going to go into the file called front, Control V to paste it, and then I'll just place it down somewhere. You can also have them where they are matching sides, and then in another video I'm going to show you how to make sure you eliminate any overlapping lines with it. But if I Control Z and then just paste this again, I can also just kind of have them temporarily floating around in this file. Now I would go and do the exact same process here for this left side. So I'm just going to bring myself to the left side, make sure that I'm head on with it. File, export, 2D graphic. I'm going to call this one left. And then you might have guessed it. Another way I can put it in here is through insert. So I can use the insert tool instead of inserting a block. It'll bring it in as one complete block. But I can go and say, hey, I want to insert in a DWG file if I want to. I just find the copy paste easier, frankly. So I'll go open, desktop. I'll have it do it by left. And then highlight all of it, Control C to copy, go back into my front file, Control V to paste. Now, even though this is two separate faces, I am just going to leave it as one drawing in here, because this way the laser can just cut these two faces out separately. It's still each one of them head on, so that's totally fine. When I get to things like this back face, if I just orient myself to the back of the object, I'm not going to be able to see it at its true length, as I mentioned. So instead, for faces like this, what you're going to need to do is right-click and have it aligned to that view. And then that's going to put me directly head-on to the back of this object. And I can file, export, 2D graphic, back. And then there it is. Open up this one. Go through and delete any additional line work I may not want or need. So in the case of like all of this part, I'm just going to go through and delete it. So now I have the back at its true length. Control copy. Go back into my original file, Control paste. If you're going to have a lot of faces, it's also then could be beneficial to close out of these files as you're opening them. And again, for things like my top, I'm just going to right click, align view, and then that's going to put me directly above the top. So even though this has a little bit of a slant to it, it'll still just put me right on top. File, export, 2D graphic, top. In this file, I'll have some extra line work that I might want to go through and delete. I'll delete this ramp because that's extra. Highlight the whole thing, Control C to copy, back to my original file, Control V to paste. And then lastly, for my ramp piece, again, right click, align view. It's going to orient me directly to that one. File, export, 2D graphic, and I'll call this one ramp. And then open ramp. And again, this one gives me a lot of extra line work that I have to erase. And then highlight the piece I want. I'll leave that in there because it's not going to make a difference. And then back on here, Control V to paste. So with that, I've been able to break it down into each one of these faces. Everything is still full size on here. So I would still need to go through the process of scaling it down to the size that I want it to be. And then also changing my layers or changing my colors. I might want to do like some trim or just delete. I don't need a line there to do that. I can just have the front cut as like that. And then highlight everything, and I can either do just a property override here to change its color, or I can create different layers in order to do it. So that's how I can export it from SketchUp as just the faces for my model to laser cut.